The first snowfall had come early that year, settling quietly over the sleepy town of Westridge like a white shroud. The woods beyond the northern hills, known simply as the Deep Woods, were silent. Too silent, locals whispered. They said once you passed the second ring of pines, the forest began to watch you. For years, people treated the stories as old superstition, something parents told their children to keep them close to home during the long, dark months. But when a forestry team vanished without a trace one December, the stories clawed their way back into everyone's breath. Eli Turner had never been one for ghost tales. A wildlife photographer from the city, he arrived in Westridge looking for untouched winter landscapes. Locals tried to warn him, but he laughed it off. "I've camped in colder, darker places," he said with a grin. The innkeeper, Mrs. Hollis, only shook her head. "The woods don't like strangers," she told him, "and they don't forget faces." Eli pretended not to care, but as he drove his old Jeep up the icy trail toward the tree line, even he felt the odd heaviness in the air. As if the forest itself was holding its breath up the wide dusk, he had pitched his small tent beside a half-frozen creek. The light fell quickly, swallowed by dense branches that seemed to knit together above him. A faint wind carried the smell of pine and something older, almost metallic. He photographed the ridge until his fingers went numb, then retreated to his tent. Outside, the woods groaned softly, the sound of trees shifting in the cold. Yet amid the groans, Eli thought he heard something else, a rhythmic crunching in the snow. Too steady to be wind that he peered through the tent flap. Nothing but endless dark. The snow was untouched. But as he zipped the flap closed, the crunching returned, closer this time. He told himself it was an animal. Maybe a deer, maybe a fox. But the steps were too deliberate, too heavy. His breath fogged the air as he grabbed his flashlight. The beam cut through the night, and for just an instant, he saw something between the trees, tall, pale, and still. When morning came, his tracks were there. But alongside them, leading all around his tent and back into the woods, were others. Bare footprints. Human. Dozens of them. Eli debated leaving. The footprints had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. But curiosity and pride drove him deeper. He followed the prints, each step crunching softly in the snow, camera ready. The forest was endless shades of white and gray, and the silence felt almost liquid, thick and pressing. He walked for hours before he came upon a strange circle of stones half buried beneath snow. Each was etched with deep grooves, old symbols that made his stomach twist. As he knelt to photograph them, he noticed something else, strands of dark hair tangled around one of the stones. He reached out, hesitated, then brushed it away. The moment he did, a gust of cold air burst through the trees, and every sound in the forest seemed to vanish. He froze. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was like the air itself had stopped moving. Then came the whisper, faint, low, threading through the trees. His name. He spun around. No one. The footprints behind him were gone, already filling with snow though the wind was still. He tried to find his way back, but the woods had changed. The trees seemed closer together now, their branches bending inward like ribs of some great creature. Panic flickered inside him. He ran. But no matter how far he went, the whisper followed, always just behind his ear, never quite clear, yet always saying his name. When he finally stumbled upon his camp again, the tent flap was open. His belongings were scattered. The camera lens was shattered, his photographs torn. He stood there, breath shaking, until something caught his eye, a small, hand-carved figure, placed carefully beside his sleeping bag. It was a wooden effigy of a man with no face. That night, he didn't sleep. By the third day without sleep, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale and sunken. Every time I closed my lids, I saw the photos from my phone, the figure drawing nearer, frame by frame, until it felt like Adler's shadow was burned into my retinas. I wanted to leave, to run and never look back, but every attempt ended the same. My hand would reach for the doorknob, but then a weight pressed down on me, thick and suffocating, whispering in my ear, "Stay." Claire knocked that afternoon. Her face was drawn, her eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept either. "It's worse now, isn't it?" she whispered. I couldn't answer, but she stepped inside anyway, clutching a rosary in one hand. She told me she had seen Adler too, not with her eyes, but in dreams, standing in her doorway, waiting. "He doesn't want the apartment," she said, voice trembling. "He wants us." Before I could respond, her head snapped upward. Footsteps thundered across the ceiling, heavy, furious, shaking the light fixtures. Then silence. The silence didn't last. From the bedroom, the door slammed shut with such force the walls shuddered. Claire screamed, the rosary slipping from her fingers, beads scattering across the floor. My phone buzzed at the same moment, lighting up on the coffee table. Another motion alert. I almost didn't look, but some terrible part of me needed to. The photo showed my bedroom, the door wide open, Adler standing in the doorway. His shadowy form was sharper than ever before. Arms too long, head cocked, mouth stretching wide. The air thickened, pressing against my chest until I thought my ribs would crack. Then, slowly, the bedroom door creaked open in real time. My stomach dropped as Adler stepped through. Not a shadow this time, not a blur, but there. His form was darker than the room itself, every edge trembling as though reality struggled to contain him. His head tilted back, mouth splitting wider, a soundless scream tearing through the air like static. Claire collapsed to her knees, sobbing, whispering prayers that dissolved into choked gasps that I couldn't move. My body was locked, my vision tunneling until all I could see was him. Adler, or what was left of him, towered in the center of my living room, pacing in a slow, deliberate circle around the couch. The same circle I'd heard from the ceiling night after night. Each step shook the floor, dragging, deliberate, unending. Then he stopped. The room seemed to hold its breath. His head snapped toward me, and in that instant, I knew. He wasn't pacing anymore. He was circling me. The next morning, Megan convinced herself she'd overreacted. Cruises had security cameras, trained staff, and plenty of people around. Surely she wasn't in any real danger. Still, as she made her way to the breakfast buffet, she couldn't shake the memory of the slow, deliberate knock on her door. The corridor outside her cabin seemed longer than usual, lined with identical doors that gave no hint of the people behind them. Two uniformed crew members passed her, speaking softly in a language she didn't recognize. As they walked by, she noticed one of them glancing over his shoulder at her. Not just a quick glance, but a long, assessing look, as though measuring her reaction. Breakfast should have been a comfort. Sunlight pouring through panoramic windows, the clatter of plates, the smell of coffee and fresh pastries. But Megan's attention kept snagging on small details. A waiter refilling water glasses seemed to be lingering at her table just a beat too long. A young couple at the next table whispered rapidly to each other and kept glancing toward the entrance. And when she finally stood to leave, she caught sight of the man from the night before, the one in the dark suit, seated alone near the back. His hands were folded neatly on the table, his plate untouched. He didn't blink when their eyes met. This time, Megan didn't wait to see if he would vanish. She turned and left. She decided to spend the afternoon exploring the ship. Deck 7 had several quiet lounges and a library that smelled faintly of old paper despite the ocean air. In the library, she struck up a brief conversation with an older British woman named Helen, who was knitting in the corner. When Megan mentioned seeing a man in a dark suit, Helen's needles paused mid-click. "Tall, thin, doesn't eat?" Helen asked, her voice low. "I've seen him too. 3 years ago, on this very ship. Different cruise. He was watching people then as well." Before Megan could ask more, another passenger entered, and Helen's demeanor instantly brightened, as if she hadn't said anything at all. That evening, Megan noticed a change in the ship's atmosphere. The wind picked up, rattling the glass doors on the outer decks. The hallways seemed dimmer, shadows stretching farther than they should. She passed a security camera mounted above the stairwell and had the sudden, irrational feeling that it wasn't connected to anything at all. Back in her cabin, she locked the door and tried to distract herself with a movie on the tiny wall-mounted TV. Halfway through, the screen flickered, briefly showing what looked like live footage of the ship's exterior decks at night. In the grainy image, a lone figure stood at the railing, unmoving, staring out at the sea. She shut off the TV, her heart pounding. The ship's engines throbbed beneath her feet, steady and relentless, but she couldn't shake the growing sense that the ocean majesty wasn't just carrying her across the Caribbean. It was carrying something else, something that didn't belong among the living. Eli was found 2 days later by a search party. frostbite on his fingers, exhaustion in his eyes, and a single phrase he kept muttering. They watched me. The townsfolk pitied him at first, but their pity turned to fear when the prince appeared outside the inn the next night. Long, bare footprints circling his window in perfect silence that he tried to explain what he saw. The sheriff wrote it off as delirium. But Mrs. Hollis, the innkeeper, looked pale. "You went past the second ring," she whispered. "You woke them." She told him about the old stories, of the settlers who vanished a century ago, of how they said the forest absorbed them, leaving only echoes behind. "They walk in winter," she said, "when the cold remembers their names." Eli couldn't stay. He packed what he could and left town before dawn. The roads were slick, the forest rising on either side like black walls. But the further he drove, the heavier his chest felt. Every turn of the tires seemed to echo, soft, rhythmic, like the sound of footsteps pacing his C.A.R.B.Y. dusk. He realized something impossible. He'd passed the same broken fence twice. The same frost-covered mailbox. He was driving in circles. The woods were pulling him back, and when he stopped the car, the engine still running, he saw movement in the rearview mirror. A pale, faceless figure standing in the road behind him. The highway that led out of Westridge had never seemed long, but now it stretched endlessly, each curve leading back into itself. Eli drove for hours, watching the odometer tick, yet never getting closer to another town. Snow fell harder, the headlights cutting tunnels of white. He began to lose sense of time. Night blended into day, hunger replaced by numbness. At last, the car sputtered to a stop. He stepped out into the cold. The air was still, dead still. Ahead of him, the forest pulsed with a faint glow, as if moonlight were trapped within the trees. Something deep within him urged him forward, into the woods once more. "They don't like when you look at them," the voice in his memory whispered. But curiosity had always been his weakness. That he walked until the road vanished behind him, until even the sound of his breathing felt foreign. Then he saw it. The cabin again, standing exactly as before, though he was certain he'd driven miles away. Smoke rose lazily from the chimney. This time, the door was open wide. Inside, the fire was burning, and across the table sat a man. Eli froze. The man looked just like him. Same coat, same camera strap, same hollow eyes staring blankly forward. When the figure finally moved, its lips split in a smile far too wide. "I told you not to come back," it said in Eli's own voice. The world went dark. Weeks passed. Westridge saw more snow, more silence. The sheriff organized another search, but no trace of Eli was ever found, except his camera, discovered at the edge of the creek. The photos inside were blurred, except for the last, a picture of the cabin, taken from outside the window. In the reflection of the glass stood Eli, and something standing behind him. Mrs. Hollis stopped opening the inn to travelers. "The woods are hungry again," she murmured to anyone who asked. And yet, the story spread. Hikers still came, drawn by curiosity, by the beauty of untouched wilderness. Most returned. A few didn't. One such hiker, a young woman named Clara, arrived that January. She had heard of the missing photographer and wanted to write a piece for a travel magazine. The locals tried to warn her. She smiled politely, dismissed it. "I'll only be gone a day," she said. They all said that. That night, her phone pinged once before losing signal. The photo she sent was of the same circle of stones Eli had found. Beneath it, her caption read, "Found something strange. Feels like it's watching me." She was never seen again. Months later, the snow began to melt. A logging crew found an old leather-bound journal wedged in the hollow of a pine. The name inside, Eli Turner. Most of the pages were smeared, but fragments remained legible. They spoke of whispers, of shapes in the snow, of something ancient beneath the roots. "The woods aren't haunted," one line read. "They're alive, and we are the ghosts trespassing through them." Another entry described the cabin in detail, though one note chilled the crew. "Every traveler who finds it leaves a piece behind. Memory, name, or face." The men laughed nervously, passed the book around, then tossed it aside. But that evening, when they returned to camp, one of them was missing. His coat was found draped neatly over a branch, his footprints circling the fire pit again and again until they simply stopped. The remaining crew left the next morning, abandoning their tools. None spoke of what they'd seen. but each carried with him the memory of that strange, endless whisper among the trees that be why spring, the deep woods were closed to the public. Years later, a storm tore through Westridge, heavy with snow and wind. The power failed, roads closed. In the darkness, people began hearing knocks at their doors, soft, deliberate, in patterns of three. When they checked, there was nothing there but melting snow and barefoot prints. Children claimed to see a man standing at the edge of the forest. He never moved, never spoke, but his eyes, or the places where eyes should have been, glowed faintly. The town grew quiet again, fearful of the dark. Rumors said the forest had taken too much and now wanted more. One night, Mrs. Hollis awoke to the sound of her name whispered through the crack in her window. She rose slowly, heart pounding. Outside, under the drifting snow, she saw him, Eli, standing just beyond the light, smiling faintly, face pale as ice. "You shouldn't have stayed," he whispered. By morning, the inn was empty. Her footprints led out into the woods. None led back. Now, when winter comes, Westridge falls silent. No one ventures beyond the pines. The forest stands vast and waiting, snow layered thick upon its hidden paths. Some nights, when the wind is low, the townsfolk say you can still see lights moving between the trees, lanterns, or maybe eyes. Travelers who pass through claim they hear whispers, soft as breath. Some wake to find wooden figures outside their tents, carved in their own likeness. Others simply disappear, leaving only trails that fade into the drifts. The deep woods have no hunger for blood or vengeance. They simply remember. Every voice, every step, every face that dared to enter becomes part of them. The forest keeps its stories like secrets, buried under frost and silence. And when the snow falls heavy and the night grows deep, if you listen closely enough, you might hear a camera shudder in the dark, followed by a whisper. Smile. Because the woods never forget.